question, what about you? You want to write down a question or something you've heard or something you're not sure about? You can share cards. And then, so we'll run through these 4 slides, then we'll do the questions, and then we'll maybe do our little craft project. So everyone here knows I'm Dr. Thompson. And a common issue that comes up for women of all ages is questions about sex, whether it's people are having a sex problem, or they have a sex fear, or they're worried that they're not normal. It comes up a lot. And one of the things that I realize is that there are not a lot of places where women learn about their anatomy, right? Because parents are shy, they use all sorts of pet names, or everybody uses the ubiquitous vagina, but they don't really talk about what's there and what it's for. And in schools, when they talk about sex ed, they really are talking about reproductive ed and STD prevention, because they never talk about sexual pleasure. And the vast majority of people in the vast majority of the world are having the vast majority of sex they have for pleasure. It's not for reproduction, it's just because for fun. So I wanted to do this so we can talk about those aspects of sex that never come up anywhere else. And it's gonna be real quick. And I'm talking about women, right? So, how did I get there? I'm not quite sure how I got to that slide. Huh, I thought I deleted that one. So let's start with the vulvar anatomy. Everybody knows about female anatomy, the uterus, the vagina, the ovaries, the fallopian tubes, but this is the anatomy that you hardly ever hear of. If you look in almost any online anatomy tool, you won't find this. You won't find a vulva. And any tools that even doctors use seldom has this. I haven't seen one yet that has it. Female external anatomy. And so we'll go over the external structures, and then we'll talk a lot about internal structures. So importantly, if this picture were more realistic, she would probably, well, this probably is realistic because she doesn't have hair, but most women will have hair on the vulva. Now with waxing and shaving, this is actually quite correct. So the labia majora are where hair would be. That's the part of the vulva that has hair. And then the labia minora are the thinner lips that are inside the labia majora, and they tend to stick out. They will stick out. Let me have you guys go this way. Do you want to show them, Estelle, how to go in?
Oh, yeah.
The labia minora, for some women they don't. For some women they're not very prominent at all. For some women they stick out, they can stick out quite far, and that's normal. Vulvas are like faces. Everybody has one that looks different. No two vulvas look alike, right? And there's individual as we are individual. So if you go down a woman's anatomy in a straight line, you get the key structure. So labor on the side, now let's go straight down the middle. So at the top is the clitoral hood. It's just a fold of skin, and if you retract that fold or pull it back, the clitoris sits right underneath it. So straight down the middle, top will be the clitoral hood. That's where the lips join. Right under that, you fold that back, there's a clitoris there. Some women have a very prominent clitoris, some women have a very small one, but that's where it sits. And keep going straight down, the next thing you will encounter is the urethra. That's the whole word repeat. Keep going straight down, you encounter the vagina, and we'll talk a little bit more about vaginas later on. Keep going straight down, the anus is down below. This area in between the vagina and the anus is called the perineum. Right? If you've had a baby, you've heard about your perineum, you've thought about your perineum, right? This is the part that stretches and maybe tears when you have a baby sometimes. It's right here, the perineum. Okay? Any questions about that? Okay. Now, I glanced over the clitoris real quick, but this is a talk about sex, and so the clitoris is everything, right? That's what we're interested in. So I'm going to show you a little bit more about that. Oh, me and these slides, wow. Okay, so the clitoris is way more than we can see on the outside. Unlike men, whose entire sexual pleasure organs, urethra, everything is on the outside and hanging out, much of female anatomy is on the inside, and the clitoris is no different. When boy fetuses and girl fetuses are developing inside their moms, they're identical for the first 10 weeks. If you were to look at their anatomy, you cannot tell from the outside if it's going to be a boy, it's going to be, or if it is a boy or it's a girl, right? At about 10 weeks, the anatomy starts to diverge. Boys, the penis starts to grow, the scrotum starts to form, the testicles aren't in it yet. And girls, the vaginal opening starts to be created, the labia start to separate. But at 10 weeks, we all look the same. if a fetus doesn't get the correct hormonal environment, it will develop external female anatomy, right? So it could be XY, but if the right hormones aren't there, externally it's gonna look like a girl. So sort of the default, biologists will say the default for human development is female. Human genital development is female. In order to get male external genitalia, you have to put the right hormones at the right time. That's an interesting fun fact. So this diagram here is just the clitoris. That's all it is. I'll come on this side. I'll use this as my pointer. So the clitoris has a lot of structure, and I'll show you this in 3D. That's what we're going to make if we have time. The bulb or the head or the glands of the clitoris is that part that you would see if you pull back that clitoral hood that I was talking about. So the only part of the clitoris we ever interact with, or no, we ever see, is the glands of the clitoris. But if you were to do a dissection like anatomists do, and look at what's on the inside, the clitoris is actually kind of like an upside down Y shape. The glands here on the outside, and then it has these structures called the cura of the clitoris that come down on the side. These live underneath the labia, underneath here. So on the inside of you, you don't see it, but are the cura of the clitoris. And remember, these are made of the exact same structures that the penis is made out of, right? Then another clitoral structure is the this bulbous structure here, and that's called the periurethral sponge, or the bulba, the periurethral bulb, or it has a couple other names that I don't remember. But note where this is. So this is clitoral tissue here. It gets erectile just like a penis does. With sexual arousal, it gets engorged. But what comes through there? The urethral opening comes through that area, and the vagina comes through that area, right? So very sensitive tissues around the vagina, around the urethra. But notice nothing is inside the vagina. No clitoral tissues inside the vagina. We'll get to that when we talk about sexual myths. And because science doesn't study women, historically, we've only just in the last 10 years started to study women in detail. This anatomy of the clitoris actually was not in textbooks until the 1970s, and it was women who said, wait a minute, how come we have anatomy books with the minute structures inside the hand, but the clitoris is just that previous picture I showed you? That was it. That was all we ever saw in textbooks. So it was women who, through their advocacy, got this now standard included. But again, if you go on the tools that doctors use to show a patient their anatomy, like, you know, we have pictures and diagrams that we can use, you're definitely not going to find that. You barely will find this, but you won't find the clitoris. But that is the entire structure of the clitoris. The part of the clitoris, hi, come in.
Sorry that I'm late.
Estelle, please show her.
Oh yeah, here.
The part of the clitoris that has the most nerve endings, just like the head of the penis, is going to be the head of the clitoris, the glans. The glans has what, 7,000 nerve endings in this small little area? So that's what makes it so sensitive and so arousable in sexual activity. But all of this is also has arousable and erectile tissue. Like a penis, all these tissues will become erect. They're smaller, so they're not going to stick out 5 feet from your body, but they become erect with sexual arousal. All right. So I'll just go through real quick the female sexual response. What happens? You know what? I need one more thing. Can you get one of the pelvic models? Yeah, thank you. So males and females have similar phases of the sexual response. The amount of time each one takes and the amount of time males or females spend in a phase of the sexual response is different. As we all know, men have an idea about sex and they're ready. Their whole sexual response from start to almost finish. The only thing they don't do is climax. But they have a thought about sex and they go through all this in a minute, right? Women are not, we're everything about a woman is more refined, right? It's true. Or I like to say, men are like, you know, your old school Volvo. Women are like Ferraris, right? Finely tuned. You can't do just anything to a woman's body. It takes a special kind of person to know how it works and to repair it if something goes wrong, right? It's the same thing, cars, they all do the same thing, but it's a degree of sophistication and refinement. Men might not like me to say that, but it's true. It is the way we're designed. So phase one of the sexual response is desire. Almost everybody's felt sexual desire. Your muscles get tense, your mouth gets dry, nipples get erect, the vagina starts to lubricate, blood flow increases to the skin, your skin tingles, right? Your hairs might stand on end. Blood flow also increases to the genitals. That's where vaginal lubrication begins. But other things are also happening. Like I said, clitorises get aroused just like penises, and they get erect, so that's happening. But the other thing that people don't appreciate that's happening in both desire and arousal is that this is a model that shows the vagina here. This is your uterus here. So if you ever were pregnant, this is where the baby lived, in here. This is a cervix, which is a part of the uterus that sticks out into the vagina. And of course, I took it away, but your tubes and ovaries that are hanging out here. So one of the things that happens when you get sexually aroused is this uterus here moves up and forward. And as that happens, the vagina lengthens. Makes sense, right? Because a lot of times when you have sex, a penis is going to go in there or something. And if something hits the clitoris can be very sensitive. How many of you have had kids, right? How many people had cervical exams when you didn't have anesthesia, right? That didn't feel pleasant because this is very sensitive, right? So if the penis is bumping into your cervix when you're having sex or whatever it is that you're putting in your vagina, then that can be very sensitive. So our bodies are very refined. So the uterus moves up and out of the way. And that vagina lengthens, so whatever you put in there will hit the back of the vagina and not your cervix. It's pretty cool. Yeah. But you can think about an extension of that. What if you're not super aroused and you try to have penetration? It can be more painful, it can be more uncomfortable, right? Because that cervix is still there, the vagina hasn't lengthened yet, and you may not be as lubricated as you're gonna be, right? So and I'll come back to that in a little bit. So arousal extends those things that started in the desire phase. Clitoris becomes highly sensitive, bleeding heart rate, blood pressure increase, muscle spasms may occur in a lot of places, but also in your hands and feet, you get real tense. Vaginal length increases, I talked about that. And then orgasm is sort of the climax, so to speak, of the sexual response. And orgasm actually lasts a very short time, right? This phase, arousal, and some people will put in another phase called plateau. You can live there quite a long time with a sufficient arousal, whether that's mental or physical. You can be in arousal plateau for hours if you want. When people talk about tantric sex, they're not orgasming for 7 hours. They're in arousal or plateau for 7 hours or 10 hours or 3 days or whatever, however long they want to do it. Orgasm tends to last only a few seconds, 5-10 seconds, although sometimes it feels like forever if you're doing it right. And you get muscle contraction, lots of muscle contraction in the vagina, around the clitoris. The uterus contracts also, and that becomes important because some women will feel that and come in complaining, oh my God, something's wrong with me. But that's normal. And you get a release of tension into the resolution phase. If you stop stimulating, eventually you'll go back to how you felt pre-arousal, right? Except maybe sleepy, because I didn't talk at all about the hormones that are released in this phase, and we don't know nearly enough about the hormones in women, but one that we do know about is with orgasm, you release a hormone called prolactin. It's the same one that you release when you're making milk, when you're breastfeeding, but prolactin tends to be a very mellow, I feel good, you may even get a little drowsy, and that explains why men fall asleep after sex, right? They make prolactin after orgasm. Women do too, and I'll come to that in a minute, but men orgasm every time they have sex, and culturally, we have defined sex as ending with male orgasm. So men orgasm and then fall asleep, and women are there like, all right, groceries and what's on TV. Partly because they probably didn't orgasm, otherwise they'd get sleepy too. And partly because if they did, it was a while ago, and now they're awake from what happened after, right? So, but everybody releases prolactin with orgasm. It's just the way we do sex, heterosexual sex, I should say, in this culture is very male focused. And so there's a difference, there's a dichotomy in how people feel after sex just because culturally the way we talk, and we can talk about that a whole lot more when we do questions. And then, I think somehow I mixed up my slides because there should be one more. Uh-oh. Okay, we can talk about it. So So a couple of sex myths I want to talk about. And then we'll do questions, and then we'll do our model here. One, G-spot. How many people have heard of a G-spot? How many people think it's real? Good, because it isn't. It does not exist. I don't know when, popular culture started talking about a G-spot. I know that porn talks about it an awful lot, and that may be how it got into popular culture. And the idea behind a G-spot is that there's an area inside the vagina that you can stimulate, and it will cause orgasm. It's what women really like. It's what you should pay attention to during sex. And in fact, let's go back here. In fact, what's being stimulated when people are looking for a G-spot or trying to stimulate it is these tissues. Remember how I said part of the clitoris surrounds the vagina. So through the vaginal wall, they're stimulating these tissues. Now, for some women, the mechanics of heterosexual intercourse or putting something in the vagina is going to be enough, and I'll talk about that a little bit more, to give her enough stimulation that she can orgasm. That's few. That's going to be less than 20% of women who are going to have an orgasm just from stimulation that focuses in the vagina. And not only is it less than 20% of women, it's going to be less than 20% of women with the particular partner they're with. Because if that woman breaks up with him and gets another partner, and I've seen this here in the office too, that may not happen for her. Someone came in and she said, oh my God, I used to have orgasms so great, and now I have a different partner and I'm not having him anymore. Because luckily with the partner she had been with, the mechanics of their intercourse was enough that she got enough clitoral stimulation to orgasm. She broke up with him and went with someone else, and it was different mechanics. Their bodies were fit together differently. So sometimes you can get away with just doing vaginal stimulation and a woman has an orgasm, but that's rare. It's not common at all. So G-spot 1. 2, oh well, that went to the second one, vaginal orgasm, right? Same thing. Some women, very few, that mechanics will work. The vast majority of women, because they're women and this is how we're designed, the clitoris is outside. It's not in the vagina, it's up here. So stimulation of the clitoris is how the vast majority of women, because that's how we're designed, are going to have orgasm. There may be a rare man in the world who can have an orgasm from rubbing his shoulder, right? But that's not how we do sex, right? Because the vast majority of men, that's not going to work. I'm certain there's a man alive who that will work for them, but that's not what we call sex. And I think for women, we shouldn't get in the habit of allowing men to tell us that vaginal stimulation is what we need, because it isn't. That's not how our anatomy is designed. And then the last one was female ejaculation. That one seems to be sweeping the culture these days. How many people have heard of that? So it's the idea, we know that when men have an orgasm, they ejaculate. Fluid comes out of their penis, and it comes out because those muscle contractions, it gets pumped out, right? And it's not as much as porn would have you believe, but liquid comes out of the penis. And so recently, people have been saying, oh, I want to squirt. For women, it's called squirting. I want to squirt too. Oh my God, how can I do that? And I've had that question in the office. Women will come and say, how can I squirt? Well, for women, things, again, we're women, so things work differently. So for women, there's no one gland that makes fluid for the vagina. There are several glands that contribute, but there's no one. And also there's no one place, like men have a prostate gland that actually has liquid in it that gets squeezed out. Women don't have that. All the entire vulva and vagina is full of ducts and glands that make oils and fluids. And when we get sexually aroused, those ducts and the blood vessels open up, and those ducts start pumping out fluid across the vaginal lining, so the entire vagina gets lubricated, which is good, right? If we're going to put something in the vagina, it becomes very frictiony, and so having lubrication works. So the entire vagina gets coated. Now, you can imagine, since the vagina is blind ending, if you're an individual who makes a lot of fluid, it's going to pool in the vagina. There's nowhere for it to go. And then when you orgasm and your muscles are contracting, that fluid is going to get squeezed out. So if there was a lot in there, it may very well come out and look like a squirt, but that's not ejaculating. That's just the fluid that's accumulated in your vagina is coming out. It's not the same thing as some women do it, sure, and if you do, more power to you. Get more sheets. I don't know, but it's not ejaculation. It's not something you have to do. And it certainly isn't related to sexual pleasure, right? Many women have sexual pleasure and squirt, many women don't and squirt, vice versa. So I just wanted to, I know those are popular myths, so I just want to go through those. All right, that's all I have to say formally. Questions, things you want to talk about, things you've heard, and you can ask for a friend. Anybody? Everybody shy? All right. Well then, let's do our little exercise. While you're thinking, and shout out at any time, if you want. Okay. So we'll do our little fun exercise then. Did I hear some? Okay. Everybody needs a little clay for this. It's probably a little dry because we're in Arizona. So we're gonna make a vulvar model. Here, and you can share. You probably don't need all that much as I gave you.
I have a question. And maybe this is
And you can work
for
in
everybody
teams.
here. If you're having a hard time
Here.
having an orgasm,
Let me share.
or don't know how to have an orgasm,
Share.
what do you recommend?
Time and attention. Hey, come in. So that's an excellent question. One of the, yeah, come around this side, that way you can share. One of the other, oh, there's more. One of the, come up to the table so you can share with somebody. Actually, some of you probably have way too much. We'll see when we start making. One of the issues for young women, like I said, is that there are very few occasions where we learn about our bodies. And since nothing's sticking out, you kind of have to go looking for it to find it. Now, lots of girls do. Lots of young girls find whatever's on their bodies when they're little, especially if they don't have parents who are particularly punitive. But a lot of parents are. They keep girls from touching themselves. They say it's bad, it's dirty, etc. So a lot of girls go to womanhood and they've never explored their anatomy. They've never looked. They've never touched it. I have a couple of patients who tell me, I don't touch down there. I'm like, well, how do you wash? How do you? They're like, I use a loofah. Please don't use a loofah. So, to Vivian's question about orgasm, it is entirely possible and probable that a lot of women get to adulthood and they've never had an orgasm. The only way to have an orgasm is to try. And like I said, clitoral stimulation is it. So you need some privacy and just time. I was giving a presentation once in my residency, and it was to the faculty of the department. And I was talking about female sexual dysfunction, and I said, oh, someone developed this cream that helps with sexual dysfunction. And my department chair said, what's the instructions? Apply a rub for 30 minutes, right? Because if you pay attention, give physical stimulation to the clitoris for long enough, your orgasm is gonna happen. But you also have to be not inhibited about it, right? Because sex in general is awkward. It brings up a lot of our fears and our anxieties and our insecurities about our bodies, etc. And you gotta let those go in order to let go and have an orgasm. Orgasm, remember, is a release of tension. And if you're, it's not gonna happen. So you have to have privacy. That's one of the, unless you wanna be watched. In which case you need a little watching, I don't know. Everybody's different. And then time, and just the comfort with your body to explore. One thing that sadly our culture allows us to do is to become sexually active with someone else before we even know what we like. And then it's hard to tell your partner what you want, but you don't even know, right? And then we also are shy about talking about sex. So you're becoming sexually active with someone who you don't know you, they don't know you. Now you're shy about talking, so you're not gonna tell them. And you can see it's a setup for not having sexually fulfilling encounters. So we wind up having a lot of sex for a lot of our lives that's not as pleasurable as it could be, because the culture sets us up with a lack of knowledge, a lack of comfort, and then tells us we can't talk about it. The biggest sex organ in our bodies is this one right in here, right? So the more you're capable of talking to your partner about what you want sexually, the better your sex life can become. So you gotta, and it's awkward, right? But sex is awkward. All these body fluids, all these sounds, right? So just accept that it's gonna be awkward and just have the conversation with your partner about, I like it this way, or I don't, or touch me here, or I prefer, or move their hands where you need them to go. But for women, clitoral stimulation is what we need. That's how we're designed. So, did I answer the question? I have one more thing to add. Sex toys, right? So because women, the majority of our clitoris is on the inside of our bodies and only the glans is on the outside, it is not unusual or abnormal to need a lot of stimulation. And so sex toys, thankfully, just like every other machine in the world, it spares human effort and gets the job done. So I think women shouldn't feel shy or embarrassed or inhibited or like they're abnormal if sex toys enhance their sexual pleasure. Because it makes sense, our sex organs are on the inside, so to get the stimulation that you might want or need, sex toys help, vibrators help. And also, I know we live in a culture, like I said, that's very male focused, so men have somehow gotten the idea in their head that sex toys are about them, right? That you're replacing them or it's instead of them, and it's not about them at all, right? It's not about you. So, and I encourage you to have that conversation with your partner if there's an issue. Like, sweetie, this one isn't about you, this is about me, right? I love you for who you are, and if all you are to me is a penis, we're having a problem already, right? So yeah, it's not abnormal at all for women to require that kind of stimulation. And there are lots of places you can go that are not easy to get sex toys. In fact, Arizona has a chain called Fascinations, and Fascinations is like, it's like a CVS, except when you get up close to the shelves, you're like, oh, they're having sex in that picture, right? But it really is brightly lit. The colors are nice. There are no naked people on the walls. And I gotta tell you, everybody's in Fascination. So when you go there, be prepared to see grandma. That might weird you out a little bit, but grandma's in there picking up her things too. Because everybody goes there. Literally, it's like a drugstore, but for sex stuff. It's lubes and toys and you name it. Yeah, so if you want to explore. Other questions?
For those of us that don't have a partner, and like in my case, I'm in full mommy mode, but even before I was in full mommy mode, I just don't have, and I really have never had a giant sexual desire, maybe during little points in time in very, maybe a new relationship or during certain points. How important is it that I, like I bought a vibrator, and frankly, it sits on my shelf for months, and I forget about it. Like it doesn't even occur to me to try to use it. But how important is that for my basic health, I mean, I'm 43 years old. I would like to eventually have a partner, and I'd like to eventually have sex and enjoy sex and even date around or, get a wife. And I just feel like it's like sex is absent from my life. I mean,
so sex is one of those things that it's like going to fine restaurants. You can, and it's wonderful when you do, but you don't have to. It's not required for a living, right? So, and I actually think of sex in general in that way. Like, there's a certain element of eating that's nutrition. But the vast majority of the time when we're eating, we're not eating for nutrition, right? And sex is like that. Sex has a purpose, reproduction, right? But the vast majority of the time, the vast majority of people are not having sex for reproduction. They're doing it because they desire it. If you're not desiring it, it's fine not to do it. Now, you could say to yourself, just like people in relationships actually sometimes say to themselves, you know what, once a month I'm going to give myself an orgasm. Just schedule it and time it and do it.
like it's part of my overall wellness or something.
Just because for some people they miss it. Even though they don't have desire, they miss having the desire.
I guess I just feel like maybe there's something wrong with me, or I don't know, or I'm missing out on something
Desire
important in
is
life that's so
not
important to so
really,
many
no.
people. I don't know.
No. I mean, if you add sexual pleasure to all the problems sex causes and see that as the totality of what sex is, what are you missing? Right? Because you think you're missing out because you only think about the pleasure part. But if you think of sex in the big picture, are you missing anything? Maybe not. But like I said, even people in couples sometimes who have desire issues, I'll tell them, schedule it. Just do it on a schedule. Have sex Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or the first Monday of the month, or whatever. Because that, people miss the physical stimulation that comes with sex. That sort of, people say getting your juices flowing, right? People miss that. And if you do, schedule it and just do it, right? And you can do that in a couple, you can do it alone. And you may find that if you, like everything, if you do it, you will find like, oh wait, it's the third Monday, let me do that. It comes to mind, and your idea that you didn't have desire is just a matter of falling out of habit. And once you get back in the habit, you start thinking about it again, right? It's kind of like exercise. If you're exercising all the time, you get those endorphins, you want to go, you stop exercising for 3 months, and you're like, what, exercise, huh? Exercise? And it can happen, it can be like that, yeah. Now, but to your question about desire or something wrong with you, I wish I could tell you, but we don't know because we haven't studied women enough to know. We know that desire can change around menopause, it can change around childbirth, but what is the mechanism? Is that dopamine? Is it serotonin? No one knows, no one can tell you. We don't even know all the hormones that are released with orgasm, with desire, with arousal. So if someone knows someone who's gonna do a PhD, here's a topic, women and sexual biology, there's no information. Yeah, you'd be shocked. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. We are going to make a vulva, and I'll come around and show you my vulva. Let me take it apart first. Remember I said the clitoris has the glands of the clitoris, and then it has the two prongs, right? The legs. So that looks kind of like a wishbone. Actually, that's a better analogy for what it looks like. So it looks like a wishbone. And now you can see how you can touch that periclitoral tissue and talk about a G-spot, right? From in the vagina, you can touch that on top, and many women will find that stimulating. So if this, and it gets aroused just like the clitoris or a penis would. So if this is your vagina here, right? If you're in there, you can bump against the stuff. Also, anyone ever notice when you have to pee really bad, and you finally get home and you get to pee and you're like, oh God, that feels so good, right? Because it's coming through your periclitoral tissue.
Or why we have to pee after we've had an orgasm or have sex.
Right, because it's stimulated, right? So that clitoral stimulation makes your urethra kind of irritated, and it makes you want to have to pee. So now that all makes sense, right? Same area. Yeah. I wanted to say one more thing. Okay. So for women who are having pain with intercourse, so penis goes in the vagina and then it burns or hurts a lot, that can be a lubrication issue. And what I say to those women is, you can buy lubes, but have an orgasm before you have penetration. Why? Remember we talked about the sexual response, and part of the female sexual response is lubricating the vagina. If, as happened to almost every heterosexual woman in the world, you get an elbow in the middle of the night, you're like, all right, let's do this. Your sexual response may not have gone anywhere. So you have not yet lubricated your vagina. The way to know that you've done that, orgasm. You know you've done your entire sexual response, you've lubricated, the vagina's lengthened, the uterus is moved up out of the way by the time you orgasm. So when women have an orgasm before penetration, they're good, they're ready to go. But the elbow in the middle of the night is not arousing, right, for anybody. So that can be one of the reasons why women can have painful sex, because they just weren't all the way ready yet. They were willing, but they weren't quite ready. Their bodies weren't quite ready. What else? I thought there was one more thing I wanted to mention. I can't remember. So someone asked a question about STDs and STD prevention. So not a whole lot is different about STD prevention now than when you were in school. Condoms are the one thing we have, but the biggest thing we have to prevent STDs is, again, all of this. So people, when they get diagnosed with an STD, especially if it's HSV herpes that doesn't go away, it's not curable, it lasts for a lifetime, they get very upset because they're like, oh my God, now I have to tell my partners. And I said, well, weren't you having a conversation about STDs before this? Everybody should be having that conversation. And the people get, again, upset and awkward about talking about STDs, but the one thing that conversation makes you do is open a conversation with your partner about sex. And when you can talk to your partner about sex, you're in line for better sex, right? Because what's gonna make sex good for you is knowing what they like, knowing what you like, being able to say no to things that you don't like. Because in sex sometimes, someone comes to the table and they're like, ooh, I'm gonna bust this move on her. It's not a move you care for at all. And if you can't have open communication, then you might go through getting that move done on you for years before you get up the nerve to say, oh dude, that's awful. Right? So the STD conversation can open the door to talking about sex. And what do you want to talk about? You want to say, you know, I know that people can have things they don't know they have, because people don't routinely get tested. Not everybody has symptoms. And so it's important for us to talk about getting tested and our sexual experience and when we've been tested, and that's important. Condoms can protect you against many things, but not all things. So the viral STDs, HPV and herpes virus, you can get from skin to skin contact. So naked groin skin to naked groin skin, you can get them, and you know, condoms don't cover your entire groin. So you can get those whether you use condoms or not. If when adults engage in sexual activity, they're signing up for the possibility of STDs. You can do everything right and still get herpes, right? And pregnancy. as we well know, you can do everything right and still wind up pregnant. So when you have sex with someone, you want to know that you're with someone who understands, who's mature enough to understand that you can do everything right and still wind up in your doctor's office with something you did not want to have. That's the nature of being a sexually active adult, right? HPV is so common that everybody gets it at some point. The upside of HPV is that the major horrible thing that it causes, cervix cancer, we can prevent, right? The downside of HPV is that men get it, they give it to women, but they don't get cervix cancer, so there's no test for them, right? So you gotta talk to your partner, because he will give you his HPV. You wind up in the gynecologist's office every 6 months getting biopsies and couples, and he's off scot-free. You gotta talk about that, because you won't get your present if you don't say to him, listen dude, this was yours, you owe me something. But you gotta not be awkward, you gotta feel comfortable saying that, right? Other questions?
Should we be getting should we be getting STD tested regularly?
That's,
I mean, this might be a really dumb question, but would I know if I had an STD? I mean,
a lot of people don't. So the only way to know.
I've never had sex without a condom, but that doesn't mean
right,
I
but
couldn't not.
you could still have STD, and even the ones that condoms protect against, they're not 100%, right? So everybody who's sexually active should get tested sometimes. Now, there's some populations that have a lower risk. The 2 of your virgins, it's your first time ever having sex together. Your risk is going to be lower. You haven't been exposed to anybody else. But remember what I said about groin skin and groin skin, who you been naked with though, right? Some may not have gone in holes, but if y'all were naked and rubbing around together, you can still, there's still stuff, but your risk is lower. Lesbians have a lower risk. How low, we don't know, because one, those are smaller populations, and we don't study women enough. So we don't know as much, but we know that they have a lower risk than the rest of us who are having heterosexual sex. So they have a lower risk, but it's not zero risk. And the consequences are the consequences. Bacteria and viruses don't care who you are. They just want to live in you. And if they get in your body and you're a hospitable place to live, they'll live there. So we have this cultural idea about who gets STDs, dirty people or promiscuous people or people who have sex get STDs. And if you have sex with someone who has a virus or bacteria, you can get it. I had a patient one time, never forget her. She came in because she either had herpes or HPV, I can't remember which one. And she was like, oh my God, I can't believe I have this, but I went to school and she kept stopping herself because she kept wanting to say, but I'm a good person. And it's like, yeah, the virus doesn't care though. The virus doesn't distinguish whether you're good or bad or whether you have 40 partners or 10 or 1. If you have sex with someone who has this virus or bacteria, you can get it, period, the end. So if you're sexually active, the adult thing to do would be to get tested at some frequency. Again, if your partner was a virgin and you are completely certain that they were never naked with anyone else, you probably get tested maybe once. Reassure yourself that everything's fine and you don't need to get tested anymore. If you're a lesbian, you can get tested at a lower frequency than if you're heterosexual. If you have multiple partners, you probably need a more frequent testing, right? Because you're getting exposed to more people who could potentially have viruses. So again, you gotta use this. You gotta use everything that's in here, your brain and your mouth, and that's the best tool we have for good sex and for safer sex. There's no sex that's safe. Anytime you have sex, you're risking things because you can do everything right and still get one of those consequences. What else? Other things you've heard, what have your friends said? I know it's not about you, it's about your friend, I know.
What about low sex drive from birth control?
So, some women, and this is not just birth control, it's medicines in general. Some people can have their libidos affected by a medication. So if you start a medication and you notice that your sex drive has changed dramatically and you care, right? Because like I said, you might not care, then you definitely want to talk to your physician about it. Blood pressure medicines can do it, birth control can do it. It's not common, but it happens. It happens often enough, and if it happens to you, that's often enough. Mood medications, the SSRI class, are particularly known for affecting desire and libido, etc. So definitely if you start a medicine and you notice there's a big change for you, and you may go to a doctor who said this medicine doesn't cause that, it may not for the vast majority of people, but it may for you. Because they're all individuals and some people are more sensitive than others. I had someone come in recently for low sex drive, and we were talking about our history, and I was like, did you change medication? She goes, oh yeah, my doctor put me on a new medicine for my blood pressure. For most people, that doesn't cause decreased sex drive, but for her it did. So yeah, medications can definitely do it, and birth control pills are one of them.
Is there like a medication like Viagra for women? that helps
Excellent
increase?
question. No, and in fact, if we think about what Viagra is, it doesn't increase desire in men either, right? Viagra is specific. Viagra fixes erectile dysfunction. Men who have low desire, it doesn't fix them either, right? If desire is his issue, it doesn't fix him. Again, we don't study sex enough to know the hormonal factors that influence desire. Because how do we know medicines that decrease it? Because people come in and say, right, this decreased my sex drive. But not because someone studied it to know these are the hormones that are involved in the sexual response. When this is low, to your point, there's no, so Viagra will increase clitoral erection for women, but that's hardly ever a woman's problem, is that her clitoris doesn't get erect, right? Women don't come in and go, oh my God, my clitoris doesn't get hard, right? That's hardly ever the issue for women. Desire is more of an issue for women. And I'm gonna come back to medications, but let's talk about desire for a little bit, because this is not an uncommon problem. Another myth is that menopause changes desire. There are stages in life where desire can change. Childbirth can be one, menopause can be one, other traumas in life can be one. Again, remember I said women are like Ferraris, we're fine-tuned. We're not think about sex and ooh, we're ready. That's not how women's bodies work. Our bodies are much more complicated. Our bodies are complicated in part because they're designed to do complicated things. Female bodies are designed to grow new life. That's complicated, right? So it means we have a lot of moving parts, and our sexual desire is no different. So lots of times women will come into me for desire issues, and sometimes I can't fix it. But a lot of times, I would say 75% of the time, it's social rather than biological. And what do I mean by that? We live in a culture that, one, doesn't teach women about their bodies, two, tells women that to be too sexual is a bad thing. We have a lot of words in the culture for women who are fast or promiscuous or loose or blah, right? So female sexuality is not virtuous, it's not. So women have a lot of mental issues about that. Three, we give women all the work, right? Especially if you're with a partner and you have children. You are in charge of yourself, and if you work outside the home, your job, you're in charge of your children, you're in charge of the house, you're in charge of all the appointments, including his, right? So women get all the work. They're in charge of feeding people, clothing people, keeping people healthy, and then someone says to you, be sexy. What? If men had to do all that, right, it would never happen. Think of how little men have to do, and they don't want to have sex all the time. They want to have sex when they're awake and not tired, right? So we give women, we pile women's plates so high, and then we tell them be sexy. I promise you, if you have an issue with desire, the very first thing you need to do is take some things off your plate. And by off your plate, I don't mean ask him to do them, right? Because that's the thing we do to women. Men help. And it kills me when men talk about, I have a honey-do list. Why do you need a honey-do list? She shouldn't have to tell you what to do. You live here, you're an adult. Why does someone have to tell you that the gutters need cleaning or the cars need to go? That's not her job, right? So women have the jobs of telling men what to do. So offload your jobs. The jobs that you don't even have to tell someone to do. That are not in your brain at all. And I promise you, once we start taking those off, 7 out of 10 times, she's like, oh, I feel sexy. Ooh, let's do it, babe. Right? Because women's brains are so overloaded, sex gets pushed out. And like one of the things that Cheryl said was that she's in mommy mode, right? Kids are a full-time job. And they're not just a full-time job physically with things you have to do, they're a full-time job mentally, right? You're always thinking about their manners. Are they healthy? Are they gonna choke on something? Are the blankets right? Did they go to the doctor, right? They're a long mental list. Your brain is full. So if you have one child, far less many, and then we add your job, your husband, your house, your blah, 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 right? Sex gets pushed to the wayside. So the first thing I always talk about when women talk about decreased desire is, what can we take off your plate, right? I don't know the story of your life, but I know the story of your life. Because this is true for the vast majority of women. Most women don't get wives.
If we had wives, we'd have desire too. Our houses would be clean, our appointments would be made. Someone would know the policy number on our insurance card. Because I see women all the time. Their husbands go to the doctor and they come, babe, what insurance do we have? What's our policy number? Even though he's at the doctor for himself, she still has to tell him how to do it. What's our copay? Why do I need to keep that information? How would you stay alive if you didn't have me, right? So to the point about libido on women, one, that's a big one. That's huge, a big one. And then the number two is usually getting to know your body. Just getting to know what you like and what you don't like. Three is clitoral stimulation. A lot of women haven't even explored to know where the clitoris is and what it feels like, and do you like it on the left, do you like it on the right, whatever. And then four might be some hormonal thing, but we don't have anything to fix that. We do not have any medicines whatsoever to fix sexual desire. And like I said, we don't have them for men either. Men can suffer from low desire too, you just don't hear about it as much, because why? The culture says that men should be ready all the time. That they're sexual predators, they're sexually virile, so for women we have all these loose and promiscuous, etc. Men have the opposite. They're supposed to be sexually ready, sexually virile, and so if a man has increased desire, who's he gonna tell? Nobody. And what I find when women come in complaining about their partners, they get angry, they can be verbally abusive, or they go away from the home, they storm out, right? Because they don't want to admit that they're not manly, right? Their entire manhood revolves around their penis. It's sad for them. I feel sorry for them for that. But so we don't hear about decreased desire in men except when wives complain to me about it. And we don't have medicines for that either. We just have medicines for erection. And so maybe 2 years ago, a medicine came on the market that's marketed now for desire in women. I would not prescribe that medicine to anyone. I wouldn't take it if someone offered it to me. Here's why. That medicine actually, and I had my eye on that medicine because I thought it was gonna be the medicine we needed. It was in development in Europe as a depression medicine actually. And it wasn't a good depression medicine, it failed. But at the end of the trial, they wanted the women to bring the medicine back, and no one would bring it back. And they were like, why can't we get these women to bring in this medicine? Calling. And then finally it occurred to them to ask the women, why aren't you bringing the medicine back? And the women who didn't bring the medicine back said, because my sex life is great since I started taking this. So then they said, aha, oh my God, this could be, now they're like, cha-ching, right? The dollar signs in their eyes, like, we can make so much more money on this as a sexual help. So they did some trials, but it didn't work for that either. There's a small percentage of women will be helped by it, but the majority of women, it will increase their sexual activity by about 1 a month. So it's not, you take it every single day, but you only get one additional satisfying sexual encounter a month. That's a lot of money and a lot of potential side effects for one sexual, I mean, come on, most women will be like, forget that, right? That's just not enough. So it works. And also the way it got approved was a little shady. So it was declined by the FDA twice. The FDA did not approve it because the results were terrible. So they didn't approve it twice. So then the company, the FDA has a sort of score for demand. Part of their approval process is how does the drug work, lack of side effects, and demand for the medicine. Because you can imagine if it's something that a lot of people are going to use, even if it works just a little, it's still going to have a lot of benefit, right? So the company then founded a group, you know how on Facebook, online, that was something like Women's Sexual Function Improvement or something crazy. You know how they come up with these crazy names. And they recruited and paid women to be in this group, and then they encouraged them to lobby the FDA for this drug. So it was the vast majority of the people who created demand were paid for by the company. And it was because this demand score went up so high that it finally got approved. Isn't that crazy? So yeah, so I wouldn't spend money on it or prescribe it to anyone. And that's the only thing on the market that supposedly helps with desire. And it has a lot of side effects, and it gets worse. So the side effects of the medicine was studied on 32 people. Guess how many were women? Two. Isn't that crazy? But that's science. Science, even the first birth control pills were tested in men. It's crazy. That's the world we live in. We gotta advocate. That's why it's important to vote. Pay attention. Because listen, it's only in the last 2015, I want to say 3 years, that the NIH has a rule that if you're doing a study in the lab on cells, that half of them have to be female cells. 2015. It's 3 years ago. And even cells, they were using only male cells. That's the world we live in. We got to pay attention. And it was only because a woman noticed this. She was like, what the? And now they made a rule 3 years ago. All the studies that we did on heart disease were done mostly on men. So the gains that we made on heart disease are for men. More women die now of heart disease than men. Because the gains we've made in terms of aspirin and prevention and stents and not recognizing heart disease is how it appears in men. So we got to pay attention because we get left out. Did you have a question?
I just was curious about the research with male birth control and if that's going anywhere.
That's an excellent question. Oh my gosh. I went to public health school in 1992. And in 1992, we were like, we're going to have male birth control. It's just around the corner. Nothing. And you know one of the reasons why? Because men won't do what women will do. Because we know, you may not know, vasectomy. 15 minutes in the office, so when you and your partner are done having kids, vasectomy is a very reliable form of birth control. Men won't give vasectomies. 15 minutes in the office, you don't even need anesthesia. Because men will see their wives cut open. They'll see her uterus on the table to have a baby. And still, 15 minutes in the office, they will not do it, they refuse. So there's a bunch of things in development. But one of them was a testosterone shot. And you had to get it once a week. And men were like, oh hell no. I'm not getting an injection once a week. So women will take a pill every day, nauseous, right? There's a documentary, it might be hard to find now, called The Pill. And it's about the development of birth control pill in the beginning. And in the beginning days of the pill had high estrogen, like 100 micrograms, 90 micrograms. Not only did that make you puke all the time, but it caused a lot of heart attacks and strokes. So women knew women who died, and they would still go to the doctors and get the pill. Because having baby after baby after baby, they saw women die from that too, and they were like, yeah, Susie had a heart attack, but can I get that pill? Right? Because to women, and in part because it's our bodies who go through childbirth, we're like, we see the benefit clearly. Men, having a wife who doesn't get pregnant, to them that's not a benefit enough. Because they know she's gonna do most of the work of this baby. I mean, on some level, they know how the world works. They know that even if they have another baby they didn't necessarily choose to have, she's gonna do most, she's gonna have it. She's gonna take care of it. And even the good guys, right? I'm not talking about asshole men. I'm talking about even the good ones. They know that's how it is. So part of the delay in development of male birth control is that if there's a side effect at all, even an owie, men are like, oh no, thank you. I will not. Yeah, people are, there are lots of jokes about if men had to have babies or whatever, but the truth is funny. Men are big wusses. They won't do an eighth of what women do. Yeah, so there's still a couple of things in development. People are still working on testosterone shots because we know testosterone shots will make men not make sperm. But you can't have one sperm, right? It's got to be 0. And it's got to be 0 for the length of it, right? Because you only need 1. And so that's one of the issues, is that there's no tolerance for failure, right? It's got to be 0. And then 2, it's an injectable. No one's come up with a pill form yet that is active. And so men won't take the shots, they won't come back. There was one, I think, recently, maybe last year, a couple of years ago, that was like a once a month, right? And women used to have a once a month injection that they used, and still men wouldn't come back. They came for like the first 2, and then they were like, oh, ixnay on that. Yeah, so that's still in development. Although, would you trust a man with your birth control? Hell no. They are so irresponsible. They put their penises everywhere, and then they're like, oh my God, I can't believe she got pregnant. Did you ejaculate in her without a condom? Pregnancies happen. Yeah, there. We gotta raise them different first. Need a whole new crop.
When do you teach someone to stimulate themselves to
I would say you don't have to teach anybody, but just let them find it. Let them, and so what happens is, because we will all find our bodies if we're allowed, but the problem is that parents are very like, don't touch there. Or what you want to teach your child is, the names of their parts. So as soon as they start asking, they'll say ooh ha, and he, and this. Hey, this is your vulva, your vagina, your clitoris. Say what the things are called. One, because that normalizes for your child this body part. When you give things pet names, it's an automatic signal that that's something not to talk about, right? Because you don't even want to call it what it is. So call things what they're called. And then two, kids around 2, all kids kids will come home and say, Jane has blah, blah, blah. Bobby has so-and-so. That's the first time kids start talking about anatomy. And that's the first time parents shut them down. They're like, oh my God, why do you come out saying that? And we adultify kids a lot. So we get worried about, oh my God, sexual predator, and they're having sex, and they're not. They're learning body parts, just like they're learning their nose and their ears, and right? We're not surprised when they come home and talk about Susie's ponytail, but if they talk about Susie's vagina, which is what they would call it, then we, oh my God. The kid is just noticing that we're different. Boys and girls go to separate bathrooms, and kids start getting curious about why is that, right? And they start talking to one another, like, you don't have what I have? Or they go to sleepover, right? And they'll see, let them. Don't stop them. Just what you want to teach your kid is about privacy, right? Privacy of your body. No one gets to touch your body, including Auntie so-and-so who wants to kiss you or hug you. No, we shouldn't force kids to ever have physical affection with someone else. They don't want to kiss Auntie so-and-so, you don't get a kiss today. When they want to, then. Because if Auntie so-and-so can force your child to kiss someone, then a stranger can force your child to kiss them, right? So you never want to do that. You want them to know what's inside behavior versus outside behavior. So, you know, in our house, you're sitting in front of TV, you can fart as loud as you want. It's family, we're in the house, but you probably don't want to do that in your classroom, right? Inside behavior versus outside behavior. If you're in your room, you can rub your private parts all you want, but no one else in the family wants to see you do that. So that's in your room behavior, right? So you want to teach kids about what kind of behavior is appropriate in certain spaces, but not to not touch their bodies. And you tell them, yeah, you like to touch that because it feels good, right? But that's private activity. That's what we do when we're alone. There are kinds of behaviors that adults do when they're alone. And now you're setting your kid up to leave you the hell alone when you want to be with your partner, right? Because you've told them there are behaviors that people want to do alone. They don't want you in the room. There are things you want to do when you're by yourself. There are things I want to do when I'm by myself, right? And as that kid grows up, you haven't shamed them. You haven't told them they can't touch their bodies, but they know, when I'm in that room in this clothes, don't come on up in here. You get traumatized by what you see, right? So you don't have to teach them to find their bodies, you just let them. They will. In fact, sometimes little girls, and every once in a while I'll get a 4 or 6-year-old who comes up with a lot of vaginal discharge, and it's probably because she stuck toilet paper or a toy in her vagina because she was playing with it. She stuck something in there. And it usually doesn't hurt because there's a hole. You know, most times you just have to get it out because when she sticks it in there, she can't get it back out. And yeah, so kids will play with themselves naturally, and you just gotta let them and not shame them. You don't want them to hurt themselves, so you talk about hurting yourself versus pleasurable activity. And that you probably don't want them to stick things in their nose either, right? So you talk about it in the same way. You don't want to stick things in the holes in your body because you might not be able to get them out, and then you have to go to the hospital. And that might hurt, right? But you don't say, oh, your vagina, don't touch it. When they're bathing, you wash their vulva, and you tell them, this is your vulva, there's skin folds here. You want to make sure inside the skin folds are clean. Here's how you do it, right? You don't avoid it. So you just teach kids about their bodies, and they will explore, trust me, kids will explore. If you ask people when they started masturbating, a lot of people would say 5, 6, 4. You'll get those ages because they found stuff, and they were like, ooh, like this. Right? Kids suck their thumbs because it feels good, right? We have all sorts of behaviors we do because they feel good. Genitals are just another part of us that feel good. So yeah, you just let them explore. Other questions? Are we at time? Oh yeah, we'll pass. Other questions, burning issues? If you had another question, you want to put it on the card, I'll email it. Or if you want to email a question, that's fine, and I'll send it out on one of our email blasts. We'll just answer it that way. Awesome. Do you want to take your vulvas home? You're welcome to, or you can try it again. See, and if you leave it, I'll use it.
It'll be a display for my boyfriend tonight.
Right. Boo, this is what we gonna do tonight. And oh, so let me say one more thing before you go. Sometimes, and this is true for any couple, heterosexual, lesbian, whatever, it's good to take penetration off the table. You don't have to have penetration every time you have sex. We live in a culture that says penetration equals sex, but that is actually not the case, right? So sometimes play a game with your partner and say, for the next month, we're gonna have sex as normally as often as you normally do, but we're not gonna do penetration at all. Let's see how much fun you have. Right? Now it's a challenge. What can we do without penetration? And that's kind of fun, right? It can reinvigorate your sex life every once in a while. Or we're gonna have sex for the next 3 months and we're not gonna do it in a bed. You can't do this if your little kids running around your house, but right? And see how much fun. Sometimes decreased desire is just a matter of you're bored, right? You just gotta reinvigorate your sex life. So sometimes things like that can be helpful. So you take your vulvas home tonight, you're like, boo, look what I got today. We gotta do some learning, right? Thank you for coming. Now I got all the extra play off the table. You were so neat and tidy over there.